working as I come down on the collective, pushing it down a little bit, waiting to see what happens. We sink, and it stops again. Readjusting, let it sink again. Almost just breathe out, really. Don't slam it down. Breathe out, come down a little bit more. Breathe out, ease down on it. And we are down. Hello and welcome to another training video with Alex from Anthelion Helicopters. We're going to do a two-part series right now. First one is going to be pickups and set downs. I know that sounds kind of trivial and small, but as a new student it's one of those things that actually quite tricky to learn to start with. I know when I started learning, trying to find the sweet spot, especially on a set down, was actually quite tricky. So hopefully you'll learn some things today when we go through that, and I'll teach you a couple of techniques. There's no hard and fast rules with it. There's best practice, and everyone will always teach it slightly differently. So really just sort of take what you want from it and put it together in a way that you want, remembering that safety is always number one priority with it, and we get the aircraft down safe and we pick it up safe. So enjoy, hope you learn something, and let's get going. So, a couple of caveats here. I'm going to try, this is obviously in the 44, and I'm going to try as much as possible to make it generic between the 44 and the 22. It's worth pointing out that both do certainly have very different flight characteristics, especially if you're soloing, which you guys will at some point during your certificates, I should say, nowadays. But nonetheless, there will be a lot of generic traits, and hopefully I can point out some of the differences. So number one priority is always safety, right? At the end of the day, we have to be aware of our surroundings and make sure that we avoid any traffic around the aircraft, people, trucks, or whatever they may be. So we're assuming you've cleared the area here. We're just going to start pretty much on the actual pickup procedure itself. So now that you've got all of your feet on the controls, your feet on the pedal, your hand on the cyclic, and your hand on the... Oh, let's get this guy past here. Everything is on positive control. Basically, we're going to call this a two-stage pickup. And what I mean by that is you've got a stage where you're trying to get light on the skids, where you start to feel things squirming around, and then the stage where you're actually picking it up into a hover itself. And that's just going to be, that'll be essentially two different bits, so we can treat it as such. Now, a couple of big things here. So when we're picking up to start with to get light on the skids, the aim of the game is to get the controls neutral. That whole part is to make sure that by the time we get light, we can readjust everything to make sure we're neutral on everything, so that we pick up absolutely vertically, that we don't pick up with any sideways movement, frontward movement, rearward movement, because we might get dynamic rollover and horrible things like that. So really that first phase of the two-stage pickup is to make sure we're picking up in a neutral position, and then we're coming up to a controlled hover, 3 to 5 foot hover. So a couple of things with Robinsons. I like to actually keep my eyes inside to start with until I'm around about 17, 18 inches of manifold pressure, maybe 19, 20 on an R22, because it's slightly different again, the subtle difference here. The main reason for that is to do with the governor. We're not talking about the correlator, not the governor. We're talking about the mechanical linkage here, not the electronic link, sort of fine-tuning, as it were. The mechanical correlator, how it works before, when on those low manifold pressure settings between 12 to 18 inches, it actually adds too much gas in the way it's configured. It only starts to get accurate above about 18 inches. So the reason I tell everyone to make sure they're looking inside at the gauge is if the governor was to fail for whatever reason, then they can wind off the throttle or very so slightly to prevent an overspeed of the engine and the rotor, because below that, when you start pulling up the collective, below 18 inches, when you start pulling up that collective, that correlator is going to add too much gas, and without the governor to control it, those needles could sail, and suddenly you've got an overspeed there. Very unlikely, granted, but nonetheless still important to do. Once this thing actually gets light on the skids, then we can start thinking about getting a rise outside to actually make sure that you do the second stage of the pickup. Again, not a hard and fast rule. Some people like to look out the side the whole time. but I just like to teach worst case scenario and actually just also to learn the mechanicals there, thinking, okay, you know, that correlator is actually adding too much gas. You'll see those needles actually try and jump on you to start with as you pull up the collective. 22 or 44, it's the same, it will always try to add too much gas, so just be ready to manually manipulate that throttle if you need to keep those RPMs where they actually need to be. Alright, that's enough of that, let's pick it up. So, we're anticipating, you know, counterclockwise system, a bit of left pedal here, R44's overpowered in the tail rotor, not so much on the 22, but still. So we're pushing a little bit of left pedal here, easing up. Again, I'm looking inside right now, and I'm actually seeing, as I pull this up, those needles trying to jump a bit. The engine and rotor trying to jump. So as we're coming up here, I'm waiting, trying to keep everything very, very light in my hands and my toes to be able to predict what's going to happen here. I'm waiting till I get light on the skids. I'm up to 18 inches, so I'm going to start looking outside now. So I can start to feel things getting light. Let's see what happens here, right? So as it starts to get light, again, stop. Again, don't rush. You don't need to rush this. So when it gets light, then do you start, okay, what's it doing? Is it trying to fidget left or right? Is that a pedal issue? Is it trying to actually slide left or right or forward or backwards? Is that a cyclic issue? So fidgeting in a yaw motion is a pedal issue. Fidgeting in a moving left or right or forwards and backwards is probably a cyclic issue. So then you have to recenter yourself, you know, and then your eyes, by the way, are outside at this point. You're not looking right in front of you. It's like driving in a car, right? When you learn to drive a car, you look a long way in the distance to make sure you don't over input. So now that I'm satisfied, let's just see what actually happens here. So there you go, there's the pedal, that's the movement there, right? That's actually a cyclic movement and a pedal movement at the same time. So I'm going to push a little bit more left pedal to keep us centered, a little bit more left on the cyclic, and then we're going to just ease up into a hover, right? Again, I'm looking out. Now once you're off the ground, commit to getting it off the ground. Once you're happy it's centered, get off the ground. Once it's off the ground, get stabilized in a 3 to 4 or 5 foot hover, and get ready to do whatever else you need to do. And then we're setting it down. We'll talk more about this later. I just need to set it down to adjust the controls. So we're setting it down, eyes are out front. You're just easing down on the collective. Do not look right by you to start with. Ease down on the collective. Keep everything centered. Keep relaxed. Keep breathing. Do not tense up. As it comes down, it'll start to stop about 6 inches off the floor with the skids. 44 is slightly different because you can't see the skids, unlike a 22. So once it sort of sits on this little cushion, about 6 feet off the ground, you're just going to have to breathe out and push it down just a little bit more to ease it back onto the ground. Once you're on the ground, commit all the way down with the collective. Do not leave that collective up because you might have some dynamic rollover. Again, we'll talk a bit more about it, but fly that aircraft all the way to the ground. Make sure it is on the ground. Do not rest those controls until the collective is full down and you're confident those skids are on the ground. Alright, we're going to pick it back up now and we're going to go and start doing some work in the air. Let me turn the radio up a little bit here. Again, so 2-stage pickup, here we go again. Anticipating a little bit of left pedal, lights on the cyclic and collective. Moving around with my fingers to try and feel it out. Eyes are inside until I'm up to about 17 inches, then my eyes are coming outside. I'm anticipating some movement here. Wait until I get to that lightness on the skids. There it goes, a little bit of cyclic movement, a little bit of pedal movement. Now it picks up. Ryan's a bit more heavy than me, so we got with his gear on, so we're picking up on the left skid. Again, that's more we'll have to talk about later on as well. I'm just going to make the radio call. Lobby Star Helicopter 65 Papa Bravo Ross Aviation requesting to fly the pad for a pad assignment with Tango.
Helicopter 5 Papa Bravo Lobby Tower, departure from Ross will be at your own risk. Can I have pad 2 and 4 available?
5 Papa Bravo will take pad 4, thanks.
5 Papa Bravo, pad 4, clear land.
Pad 4, clear land. Here we are. Everything's centered, very light on the cyclic. Pedals are just working as I come down on the collective. Pushing it down a little bit, waiting to see what happens. We sink, and it stops again. Readjusting, let it sink again. Almost just breathe out, really. Don't slam it down. Breathe out, comes down a little bit more. Breathe out, ease down on it. And we are down. interesting to note there again, because we are light on fuel and Ryan with all his gear is heavier, we are heavy on the left-hand side of the aircraft. So my left skid actually touched first. Not by much, but it touched first. So in that sense, I had to just make sure that, you know, I guided the right skid down evenly at that point so that we didn't risk getting into dynamic rollover situations and any adverse movement. We'll talk more about that sort of thing, you know, in a little bit here, but when we talk more about dynamic rollover, but certainly it's the big thing. I'm sure you guys have read about it, you've learnt about it. When you start to create a rolling moment around a pivot point in the aircraft, big no-no. Unfortunately, it causes quite a few accidents in helicopters, and the more you can be aware of it, like most of these things, the more you know how to prevent it. So again, picking it up again, we'll get into our hover. So I'm looking out here at the pad, and I can see there's some big gashes in here, so I do have to be aware it's not absolutely flat. So again, here we go again. So warning lights out, pressure temperature is good, in the green, still got some fuel, great. Looking good. Alright, so two-stage pickup, nice and light on the controls. Here we go again. Eyes inside, so up to about 17 inches, something like that. Again, just keep those feet light, keep the, you know, always check in with yourself, because you tend to concentrate too much on the cyclic and the collective. Now I'm going to, you know, make sure the pedals, your feet are going light as well. Don't rigidly have your feet on those pedals, otherwise you'll get surprised by the yaw rate if they're wrong. So you're just, you know, allowing yourself to just move them just a little bit here. You've always got a bit of play, same with the cyclic, I'm moving it around a bit. Here I am coming through 18 inches, now I'm looking way out front there.
Helicopter 156.
Until I get light here and then just readjusting. So there I am light, so I'm going to stop. I initially felt a bit of backward movement this time, so I'm going to push forward a bit on the cyclic. Pedals feel okay, now I've got a bit of right movement on the cyclic. So there we go, and we're looking good. Now positively coming up 3 to 5 feet. Alright guys, we're back on the ground now. You know, we've been through pickups and set downs today, so in summary, you know, we do it a two-stage pickup. Remember, before we get light on the skids, my eyes are predominantly inside to make sure that if there is a governor failure, which again is something we'll talk about in a later video, that we don't allow the correlator to overcompensate, as it were, and put more fuel in the engine and potentially overspeed the rotors. So once we get to about 17, 18 inches on the 44 here, and probably more like 18, 19 on the 22, there's a beta 2, then the eyes go outside. Again, the purpose of, you know, when you're light on the skids and then stopping is making sure that the helicopter is neutral in all directions, that we don't allow any skidding to go on, either forward or backwards, or worse, laterally, so that we don't ever get any risk of dynamic rollover. That's the big no-no, dynamic rollover. So, you know, just remember that's why we do it. So when we pick up, if you're not totally happy with it, you can always put the collective back down and, you know, readjust and take a breath. But when you get light on the skids, you are readjusting the pedals for any excess yaw and the cyclic for any sort of drift that you can see going on, so that when you pick up, you're picking up straight. And once you've got it off the ground, commit to it, bring it up into that hover, 3 to 5 foot hover to stabilize, and then you're set. Conversely, when you're setting down, even more so, you know, make sure that when you sit down, it's nice and smooth. Let me just get a bit more RPM here to stop this thing shaking around like shaking Stevens, this thing. You know, when you're setting down, make sure again, you know, hopefully you're in the wind. Again, we'll talk more about, you know, we did a bit of crosswind and tailwind set downs, but for this we're just assuming you're in the wind, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to land and going to set down in the wind. But when you do it, again, you know, be light on the controls, make sure your cyclic sensor, make sure your pedals are light, ease down on that cyclic, the collective, until, you know, you sort of feel it like sitting on a cushion. It won't go anymore. It will do that, you know, again, almost like just like breathe out and push it down ever so slightly until you touch the skids. Don't crank it down, because then we'll bounce, you know, in a again, dynamic rollover situation potentially. Just squeeze it, ease it down, always breathe out at the same time to make it smooth. Anticipate that every landing is a slope landing, you know, because the aircraft's going to be loaded differently. You'll probably feel different than when you took off, because you burnt fuel at that same time. You know, just make sure that when you hit, you're cognizant of which part the skid is hitting at that time, and then guide the rest of it down appropriately. once you are down, commit to being down on the skids, and then come all the way down the collective. Don't leave any of the collective pitch. So again, you reduce that risk of rollover should you inadvertently knock the cyclic at the same time. If it doesn't feel good, guys, remember, if it doesn't feel good and you're bucking around a bit and it's a bit windy, don't be afraid to pick it back up again. Just pick it back up to a hover and take a breath, recompose yourself, and do it again. There's no rush to do this. It's better that you take your time, do it properly, and once you're down, then commit to it fully down, and then you'll be good. So, thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned a lot today. Again, there's a lot to pickups and set downs, and we kind of scratched the surface a bit here. I could drone on about this for hours, but hopefully there's some useful tips and points with what to do and what not to do. Again, just remember that dynamic rollover. That's the main reason that we do what we do. And just let me know if you guys want to see what else you want to see. We're going to keep running through all of these subjects up until when we get to EPs and get to autos and all that fun stuff. And we'll see you next time. So fly safe and have fun out there.